Welcome back. Thank you for being here. We're continuing this conversation about the ways that God speaks to us and the ways we experience God and the way God influences us through the music we listen to. There's something about God speaking through music that stays with us in ways that, we were talking a little bit earlier and you mentioned that you're not sure if anybody remembers anything you say on Sunday morning or not.
I may forget it by the time I get to the car.
It's interesting, right? That, but if you hear lyrics set to music, the chances of you remember them are much greater.
I think about growing up, the preamble to the Constitution was set to Schoolhouse Rock. You know, they did that.
Yeah.
I know the preamble to the Constitution today because it was put to music.
Right. You also know how a bill gets through Congress.
I also know how a bill gets through Congress, which is really important.
Very important. But that, I mean, it's fascinating that because music it's a form of poetry. It's a form of expression, absolutely. And the Psalms are poetry, right? But the Psalter is sung. So when most of the hymnody that we have, and I know there's always that debate between, well, is contemporary music Christian music? It's kind of a tired debate at this point, but it's rooted in Scripture.
So I think it was St. Augustine who once said that every song is a prayer. And if we think about it that way, it certainly becomes much more than just the entertainment value before the pastor gets up and preaches the sermon.
Right. And it's not just in the last few years we've done this. What does, you think about when Moses crosses the Red Sea and Miriam sings, right?
Miriam sings a poem put to music that celebrates and again, a very joyous atmosphere.
Of course, David is known as being musical.
Yeah.
I mean, his first job wasn't being king. When he goes to the palace of Saul, he plays the lyre for Saul to soothe and ease his anxiety. So that music's always been there.
Think about even the trumpets that Joshua takes the people around.
Trumpets and drums. And
the walls of Jericho, and they play the trumpets and the walls go tumbling down as the song goes.
Yeah, so it's a lot. It's always there.
It is often there in Scripture, and it is especially present, Steve, in our Wesleyan tradition. Mm-hmm. The two founding, the two people who are most responsible for this movement called Methodism were a couple of brothers named Charles and John Wesley. And especially Charles is probably one of the most prolific writers, songwriters ever. And his songs, his hymns that he wrote were simply living and speaking the faith put to music.
Yeah, and it's taken theological thought and just straight up Scripture and putting it to a tune and giving something that could be sung. Because you got to remember, we have the advantage of high literacy rates. We have the advantage of being able to watch things on YouTube. That's not so throughout the ages. And so to communicate these things, it had to be sung. I mean, once upon a time, books were very expensive. Not everybody had a Bible that they didn't read. Not everybody had books on the shelf. So you had to get the information in people's heads and hearts. And that's what singing the faith does.
So this particular resource that we call the United Methodist Hymnal is a marvelous resource, not just for music, but also for the ways that Scripture speaks into the hymns. Almost, you can go through and trace back in a section called the index. You can see where every hymn references a Scripture. It's a remarkable just how we really are singing the Scriptures. We are singing the faith.
And it's changed throughout with each generation. For instance, the early Methodists were, given a hard time by proper church people because they were being bawdy or irreverent. Their music moved in a different way because in the tradition that Methodism came out of, which was the Anglican Church, music would have been very high church. It would have been choirs. It would have been singing chants, singing in Latin. So all of a sudden, you put words into the vernacular, words that everybody understands. And so the proper church people looked at some of the stuff that John and Charles were doing, and they just turned their nose up at it and said, how could that be? How could that give God glory? And I think that the litmus test for church music isn't whether it's sung to an organ, or whether it's sung a cappella, or whether it's sung to drums and electric guitars. Right? So what is the litmus test? Does it reflect Scripture? Does it reflect the tradition and theology of the church? Does the message is what is important? And the container can speak to different people in different ways. You had an interesting observation about organ music.
Yeah, so the organ was an instrument that was not introduced until, 1700s?
Something like that.
And so
technological marvel.
Yeah, and so it was introduced and people turned their noses up at it. That doesn't sound like church.
It's because it was originally in the opera houses and in the theaters and in the entertainment districts, not in the church.
And as it was introduced into the church, over time it became synonymous with church music. And I think most of us who grew up, as I did, with a fairly traditional worship service, it's almost synonymous. Organ music is synonymous with church music. And yet here we are today as things change, and most churches, I think, at least have some level of what we call modern music. The organ is kind of a forgotten instrument at this point.
Yeah.
And yet, as instruments come and go, what is the most important thing is that we stand on this deep faith and recognize the importance of music in that. I want to talk a little bit more about Charles Wesley and John Wesley and the importance of how that faith. The United Methodist Hymnal, I think, has about 80 Charles Wesley hymns. Everything from "O 4,000 tongues to sing, my great Redeemer's praise." Hymn number 57. That's the first hymn in this United Methodist Hymnal. But it's also Christmas music. Christmas music became a way again of celebrating this.
Tell the story.
Awesome, to tell the story of the nativity of Jesus. Music plays a vital role in the life of the church, and often worry when I look out and I see people, as we're singing a hymn or we're singing a song, it's like they've checked out. This song isn't for me. I don't sing. But if every song is a prayer, then every song is an act of worship that we are invited to participate in. And it's so critical in the life of worship that God's people see it as liturgy, the work of the people.
Right, and the participation. I can't say that.
Participation.
Thank you.
You did all
for
right.
helping me with that. Some days are better than others with my enunciation. Music does something to our very being. When several years ago I had the opportunity to serve as a chaplain at Caroline's Medical Center, and we did it was kind of an experiment. Did some research around how can music help people mitigate their pain. And so what was found from that is that when people took a deep breath, listened to certain types of music, and we were in that setting using mostly classical music, that they reported much lower issues with pain. So the music, and as we're learning more about our biology and physiology, you can go in and scientists can see how brain waves and brain chemistry changes when people listen to music.
Even in vitro, moms and dads are encouraged to play music for their children as they develop. Plants are known to thrive with music being played around them. Children learn best through this idea of introducing music. Kids today, I think especially, it seemed like to me, I don't know what they're playing, but they have those earbuds in an awful lot. And it seems like that music really does play an important role. Music has shaped politics.
Yeah.
The politics of back in the 60s and 70s, the politics of...
and it still does.
Of Bob Dylan, and so many of those really were shaping generations. Music plays such a vital role, and especially for us in the life of faith. So What are you listening to these days? Are you listening to the faith? Are you experiencing God? That's the main thing we want to focus on.
Yeah.
Do you have an experience of God?
And
driving in your car, walking your walk with your iPod, or whatever it is they do now?
Yeah, whatever they do now. This guy's getting up there. I'm not far behind him. But the idea is that you find the music that connects to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, and that can be, there's such a wide range. And one of the blessings of all the technology today is that it's available and it's there and you can find it.
So as we close out the session today, I just want to invite you experiencing God through music. Tomorrow we're going to have a special guest with us. I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a great day.
I am too, because I'm tired of carrying you along.
You are. I'm getting heavy. You ain't heavy. You're my brother. See you tomorrow.
All right, bye. Thank you.